And most men hate therapy.
I don't hate therapy. What I said was, and a lot of people had some issue with this, is that men have a burden of performance that women don't have in general.
Mhm.
Not some women do have a burden of performance. Don't get me wrong. If you're an attorney, but the reason why you have a burden of performance as a woman is because you're in a male-dominated job generally. Now, unless we're talking about even a WNBA player. Like for
Mhm.
women in general, when they're very attractive, they don't have a burden of performance like a man does. They have a burden of performance, but it's not the same. Go to a therapist for a woman and you go to a therapist for a therapist for a woman can say, here's what we do to get you into the perfect emotional state. And those
Mhm.
things are effective and those things are useful. But
Yeah.
when we have the same therapist go to a man and say, we need to get you in the perfect emotional state, he's like, but I have to also run this company and
Mhm.
perform. That's why I'm a performance coach, perform to a
Mhm.
certain level. And my statement was, if
Yeah.
you have a therapist who is so woke and egalitarian that he treats men the same way he treats women, he's not a good therapist. And as a man, probably shouldn't see him because as a man,
Mhm.
no matter what your therapist tells you, you're not special and you always have a burden of performance. That's what I was trying to say about it.
It's an ego thing. A lot of men, they don't want to go to a therapist because their thing is, who are you to tell me what I'm doing with my life? So there was a difficulty in it. So I think you touched on a point that I feel like some men can relate to. And yes, 100%. Even with me reaching out and interviewing therapists each week, the majority are women. It's very difficult and rare to find male therapists. And even therapists, like one of the male therapists was saying it to me. He was like, we need more male therapists for men.
Under the age of 30, it's one out of every 20 therapists is male. This very, very like therapy is almost completely dominated by women. Now, here's the thing. Therapy, I think, is good for women and it is dominated by women and it can be good for men. Like, for instance, Stephen, if you told me right now you had a therapist for me and this guy completely or woman completely and totally understood my burden of performance, meaning if I felt upset or angry or whatever, that
Mm-hmm.
comes second to getting the job done. As
Mm-hmm.
long as I had a therapist who grasped that concept, I think I'd be good. You understand what I'm saying? What I can't have is someone telling me to relax or telling me in those type of situations, because at some point, no matter what, the problem has to get solved, no matter how I feel about it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the issue that I found. And I'll just be honest with you, like, and again, this is not all women. There's absolutely some women out there who are cardiologists, and there's women
Yeah.
out there who have massive burden of performance. The majority of women I meet do not have the same burden of performance that a guy who's running a construction crew does or a guy who's running a military campaign. It's just very different. And so for us, we don't have the luxury of caring about our feelings to the extent our mental health is still important. Men commit suicide at a far greater rate than women do. And it's because we don't take care of our mental health. I fully agree to that. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is the solution isn't to use then female therapy techniques on men. That's not the solution. The
Mm-hmm.
solution is to have a different type of therapy for masculine men. By the way, when I say masculine, they could be gay masculine men or straight masculine men. It's just there's a way that masculine men need to be approached and therapy need to be used on them in a different way than it is for a woman, or else it just doesn't work. Telling me to go into my feelings and then like I don't have time to do that. I have to perform.
Mm-hmm.
We need to start with performance. If you ever watch there's Bobby Axelrod, what is it, Billions? You remember the show Billions?
Yeah, I remember Billions. Yeah.
The lady psychologist who she was a PhD, Wendy Rhodes'
Mm-hmm.
character is a performance coach. She's not a therapist, she's a performance coach. I'm also not a therapist, I'm a performance coach. I'm not a licensed therapist, but
Mm-hmm.
I am a performance coach, meaning what'll happen is, and this is where it comes a very big difference between men and women. A lot of times for men, if we go out as a group and we accomplish a goal together, you'll be
Yeah.
amazed at how many, the depression just gone. Wait, what happened to the depression is gone. Oh, I felt
Mm-hmm.
loneliness. Well, let's go out. Let's figure out a way to become attractive to the opposite sex. Let's get ourselves in better physical shape. And then let's go ahead and get a super awesome friend group. All of a sudden, loneliness, Stephen, gone,
Yeah.
just gone like that. There's just
Yeah.
these therapeutic solutions for men that don't necessarily exist with women. And I'll give you another big one, and that is testosterone. Testosterone is not something that's prescribed by a psychiatrist, but there's a lot of psychiatrists out there that have prescribed Zoloft
Mm-hmm.
to people who really, if they had just got their levels checked, they'd
Yeah.
actually be much happier. And this is also the reason why men suffer from depression less,
Yeah.
is because we have higher testosterone than females do. So that's where that comes from. And again, if you live a sedentary existence, like for instance, you're exceptionally wealthy, you live with your parents, and you have no intention whatsoever of going out, getting a job, or starting a business, then I think the same type of therapy, non-performance based therapy that females experience, I think that might work for you. But if you're in a situation where, like, I have 60 employees that work for me, We have to make payroll every month, and I have to go out there and grind every day so that we make enough money to pay our employees, then I don't have the luxury of sitting there focusing on my feelings. Or even if I do, the job still has to get done no matter how I feel about it.
I'm gonna give you an example of something that happened to me. I remember I grew up around feminists. My sister gifted me Bell Hooks' book, Feminism is for Everybody. And so I always grew up with them. And my dad is sick. He had like 4 strokes. And so when he had like the second stroke, and we were going to the hospital like to see him, my sister like pulled me aside. My sister is a staunch feminist lesbian, and she was like, listen, I need you to man up. You can't show any emotions. You can't be sad. I need you to man up and deal with dad when we go into the hospital. And I felt like that stuck with me. I never said it to her, because I was like, I've always been raised feminist. I've always been raised to be in touch with my emotions. But in the time of like high pressure and in like very like serious traumatic experiences, I still had the expectation of manning up and of being in control of my emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like,
isn't it funny how that works?
Yeah, so like, and I don't think she even realized it when she said it to me. You know what I mean? But it stuck with me in terms of, okay, as a man, even with my emotions and even with the trauma, I still have to be a man in life, in heavy situations.
Imagine an existence with no internet, no infrastructure, no electricity, no running water, nothing. And you live in an agrarian society out in a village somewhere, and every day is a survival scenario. That whole situation where like, I need you to man up, that's every day for our ancestors. Every day was like that. And because of that, no matter how offensive this becomes to people, gender roles were defined 50,000 years ago, not because of a patriarchy by men, but because that was necessary. Men were bigger and stronger, and therefore the bigger and stronger gender needed to go hunt and protect. And that's the way things, worked back then. They don't have to be that way now. And so because of that, because we get further and further away from a survival scenario, like you were mentioning before, Stephen, then you can have an entire life as a man where you don't have to man up. You can be super in touch with your emotions. You can wear a pink dress and start dating Megan Fox. All kinds of, you can paint your hair all kinds of funny colors. You can go snitch to the feds, and all of a sudden women are still attracted to you. This is a very different world. You could be addicted to heroin and get tattoos all over your face, and Post Malone. Now your women find you incredibly attractive. Like the whole concept of manning up isn't just because it's not necessary. There are other ways of survival now. That's the reason why there's a lot of confusion when it comes to that. But for those men who are famous and want to live that lifestyle, that's one thing. But for the rest of us, that we have to perform. Normal men have to perform in order to survive. Have you ever, as a performance coach, have you ever had a situation with a client where the things that worked for you, the books that you read that pulled you up and helped you to man up, did not register for your students? Or did you ever have a situation like that? Yeah, there are several, but the main one is A New Earth and the Power of Now, and another book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a by Mark Manson. The Power of Now is by Eckhart Tolle. If someone hasn't suffered enough, those books mean nothing to them. Just imagine like an NBA or an NFL team that just barely makes the playoffs every year. So they don't pick high enough in the draft to get better players, but they're not low enough in the draft to where they're going to tank. They haven't suffered enough, right? It's the same thing. Like for me, when I hit rock bottom, which is my father being killed by a drunk driver, my girlfriend breaking up with me being sent to the Middle East. There was a lot of things that went wrong in 2006 for me. Watching the Dallas Mavericks lose to the Miami Heat in the finals. Like there was a lot of things that were traumatic that year. When that happens, for me, I had suffered enough. My body just sort of gave out. There's this thing called your body continues to produce cortisol. If you've gone through like severe depression, there's this thing where your body cannot produce any more cortisol, and you just have this like moment of reprieve where you just feel fantastic for a little while. My body had gotten to that point, adrenaline fatigue. Like I just couldn't produce any more cortisol. And then from that point, once I finally read The Power of Now, I had suffered enough to where just the concept of like me being in the present moment and not suffering, and like the realization that I am going to die and that I'm not that special. When I came to that, it was just such a magnificent relief. I still remember to this day. I'm driving southbound on I can't remember, it's I-85 from Atlanta to Warner Robins, Georgia. And I just pulled over the side of the road because it was just such an incredible relief for me, this realization that like I'm going to die. And when I do, it's not that big of a deal. Like it's not going to matter that many people. And it was so liberating to just not worry about what other people thought. Now, so what I just said to a lot of people who are like very, like they've suffered, but not too much. They've grown up in kind of a middle-class existence, had their heart broken a couple times or whatever. To those people, everything I said is going to sound like hogwash mumbo jumbo. But when you've actually hit rock bottom, and my rock bottom is not like living on the street rock bottom. Like, there's certain people who've gone way further than me. But when you've gotten to your bottom where you've suffered enough, then at that point, then all of a sudden these books about enlightenment, present moment awareness, and gratitude, they start making a ton of sense to you. That if you haven't suffered enough, you're just not going to experience it. And I have some friends of mine. Yeah, I have some friends of mine that are probably worth maybe $50, $100 million. And so what happens is with money can always placate their suffering to the point where they never suffer enough. I have a couple friends of mine, like they have, private jets or whatever. And it's like their heart is broken by a girl, but because there's always 10 more girls, or they have a bad business deal, but they're so wealthy that it's like they can always cover up the pain. So they never suffer enough. So they never get to a point where they look for enlightenment.